Before your body is destroyed, take me in. You can avoid destruction and experience a new birth.
Rise and Fall of Parasite Eve franchise. Parasite Eve is Square Enix's first serious attempt to pioneer a new form of console role-playing games, the cinematic RPG. It is based on the famous Japanese novel of the same title. The game is virtually bursting at the seams with computer-generated cinematic moments, but it also discards many of the things we've come to anticipate from the company's previous efforts. As this new phrase suggests, while this isn't strictly a negative trait, the game isn't the best Square has to offer. However, it is still significantly superior to the greatest products from most other developers. Initially released in 1998, the game was re-released on the North American PlayStation Store on March 15, 2011, as a PSOne Classic. It's not in the PlayStation Store in Europe, probably as it was never released there. If you're a Square fan, Parasite Eve will come as a surprise. It's not at all what you're anticipating. It has the same excellent production standards as their previous games, and it borrows from them as well. The active time battle engine from Final Fantasy VII has been substantially tweaked, but everything else is brand new. It may be a turnoff for some diehard fans, but for those willing to get past the fact that it isn't another Final Fantasy, it has a lot to offer. And its peculiarities, believe it or not, work in its benefit rather than against it. Set in modern-day New York City, Christmas 1997 to be exact, the first installment of this franchise closely, but not entirely, follows the story of the book on which it is based. Players take on a role of an NYPD officer, Aya Brea, as she tries to solve the mystery of Eve, a young lady suspected of being responsible for a succession of heinous murders and accidents throughout the city. Eve has the ability to convert animals into ferocious killing machines, impulsively ignite the innocent, and generally make a mess of anything she makes contact with after being transformed by self-aware mitochondria. And Aya is the only one who isn't affected by her evil abilities. You take on the role of that woman when she realizes that her decisions will determine humanity's fate. Parasite Eve, Squaresoft's largest release since Final Fantasy VII, features an engaging tale in the cinematic RPG, as Squaresoft calls it. Its gameplay combines action and horror components with classic RPG elements to create a game that could be compared to a cross between Final Fantasy VII and Resident Evil. However, while Parasite Eve incorporates many of the best characteristics of both of these games, it makes every effort to appeal to gamers. In terms of gameplay, it's about reproducing the plot of the novel rather than giving the players complete freedom to explore the game world. It's highly linear, but that's the price you pay for building a game on an established work of literature. Look at any book to film adaptation and you'll notice something similar. As a result, what we eventually wind up with can be both amusing and an exercise in going through the motions to achieve the goal. We also get a lot of filler, random combat, between important plot events in the process of translating the book's plot into a game, which are mostly just fights with Eve's multiple forms. To begin with, the blended turn-based real-time fighting system is a breath of fresh air. Possessing the capacity to outsmart enemy attacks in real time and position yourself for more precise assault of your own is a brilliant notion, but it's not without flaws. The most famous of these is an innovative weaponry upgrade system that appears to be more of a bother than it's worth in the end. However, the combat system on the whole works in the game's advantage. Parasite Eve should be praised for its aesthetics, which is second to none and a testament to Square's work. Everything about it is stunning, from the character design to the pre-rendered backdrops to the CG cinematics. To top it off, the translation is one of Square's best yet, more than accessible and brilliantly capturing the book's adult tone. However, those looking for extended adventures should be aware that Parasite Eve can be completed in under 14 hours, even by complete beginners. The background imagery is so beautiful that you'll find yourself appreciating your surroundings rather than pressing on with your objective. Although the polygonal figures, motions, and actions during plot passages aren't quite as clear as the backdrops, they are emotive and believable. As Aya, you'll have to fire your way through a slew of monsters, many of which are mutant, urban animals, and thus not really intimidating. And while some of the boss creatures, such as the particularly enormous and ill-tempered three-headed dog, are both eerie and terrifying, the majority of your opponents will fail to impress. Even the most discerning fan of computer-generated cinematics would be blown away by various animated cutscenes in Parasite Eve. While the cinematic moments are seldom very long, they are frequent and almost always breathtaking, especially as the game progresses. You'll see spectacular panoramic images of New York City, gory deaths, or even grislier metamorphoses, and even some good old military involvement, among other things. Though there isn't quite enough CG to fill a feature-length picture, there is enough to keep you entertained throughout. It's effortlessly interwoven into the game, making important plot events far more emotional and the entire game far more memorable. Fans of the series have been critical of Parasite Eve 2, with most of the critique focusing on the game's greater reliance on the Resident Evil franchise. The resemblance is evident in both the plot and gameplay of the game. The original version of Parasite Eve was a buddy cop horror narrative about a monster loose in New York City, and the majority of the game focused on a cast of characters battling to stop it and the impact the investigation was having on them. However, when compared to PE2's shadow organization manufacturing artificial neo-mitochondria creatures, the resulting underground labs, and the little girl plot device character, it's difficult to deny Resident Evil's narrative elements had a much greater impact on the sequel. PE2's story isn't horrible, but if the purpose was to offer a serviceable fanfiction, we could suppose the mission was accomplished. The parts of the backstory this game offers, and the idea of the human race attempting to influence and control mitochondria is thematic and reasonable, at least in this universe. Square is continuing the overall storyline of the first game, Parasite Eve 2, which followed the escapades of young Aya. Aya's own mitochondria were awakening, and while this was beneficial to her in terms of assisting in the resolution of the New York incident, it led to her departure from the police department out of concern for her coworkers. Brea has a new employment as an NMC, Neo-Mitochondrian Creature Hunter, with the FBI's MIST, Mitochondrian Investigation and Suppression Team, branch. Nearly 3 years after the events of Christmas 1997, as course of her inquiry into a series of instances involving neo-mitochondrian creatures, which began in a Los Angeles office building in September 2000, she learns more about these beings and gains insight into her own mitochondrial problem. The plot is delivered through character chat sections and some of the best computer-generated films available on PlayStation. Square has a reputation for producing outstanding computer graphics, and Parasite Eve 2 will not disappoint the company's admirers. The CG is not only beautiful, but it also does an excellent job at giving the game a cinematic feel. The only genuine criticism is that the CG and the game as a whole could have benefited from some voiceover work to give it a more cinematic sense. In terms of the premise of the game, Square has managed to build a compelling story that had me guessing and wanting to learn more. The translation quality isn't quite as good as the company's recent efforts in games like Vagrant Story, Chrono Cross, and The Legend of Mana, but it's also not horrible. There are a few strange sounding lines, but it's far superior to what you'll get in most survival horror games. This is a lovely game. While many people whine about the shortcomings of pre-rendered 3D backgrounds and how they limit player engagement and camera angles, there's no arguing that they must be pre-rendered if you want the greatest looking backgrounds on PlayStation. The sceneries in Parasite Eve 2 are some of the most aesthetically spectacular and intricate that you'll encounter on the system. While they are mostly stationary, the degree of detail is so amazing, and there are so many atmospheric elements added that they appear and feel alive. The game has some excellent lighting effects, and many of the backdrop features, such as blood on the floor or scratches on the wall, contribute to the player's immersion. With Parasite Eve 2, Square has succeeded in the sound department as well. The game's musical score is superb, doing an outstanding job of building the player's feelings and offering just enough tension and sensation at important game points. Furthermore, the sound effects are well done, with everything From footfall that sound different depending on the surface you're walking on, to ambient background noises and a variety of monster cries and squeals, all contributing to the gamer's immersion in Aya Brea's world. Parasite Eve's long-awaited comeback, named vaguely The Third Birthday, is a welcome one. Fans will like the tiny character cameos and scene elements in this third installment of the series. If you haven't played the prior games, don't worry. Square Enix provides plenty of additional details to fill in the gaps. More importantly, each game has a unique gameplay slant, with this installment combining a rich RPG backbone with third-person action. These days, Manhattan can't seem to get a break. Aya Brea, the original game's hero, and a Square Enix cult favorite from the PS1 era, returns to the Big Apple, which has been ripped apart in a fantastic CG opening sequence. As the game progresses, we learn that a year has passed and humanity is in perilous straits. Aya is charged with traveling back in time to stop the virus from spreading after being rescued from the ruins and losing her memory. The Twisted, a massive infestation of horrific tentacular animals known as the Twisted, have been added to the expanded universe of Parasite Eve, and Aya now has a new ability to stop them in their tracks, Overdrive, which may be initiated at any time by holding down the triangle button, allows Aya to teleport to and occupy any human person nearby. This is, without a doubt, the Third Birthday's coolest mechanic. Overdiving gives the shooting a lightning-fast tempo and a depth to the strategy that most shooters can't match. It operates in a straightforward, logical, and fairly accurate manner. The Twisted are easy to defeat at first, but after a few chapters, the skies are filled with targets shooting toxic clouds. Giant crawling powerhouses roll towards you from all sides. There are dozens of different types, and not all of them are bulletproof. Expect to be punished if you don't master movement and develop distinct tactics for each. At this stage, knowing how to use Overdrive becomes crucial. Aya, on the other hand, is a fairly weak character. You'll be cooked if you're not quick on your feet and don't know how to dive roll and auto cover. Thankfully, before diving back in time, you can ascend back to the secret between missions facility to tune up. The Third Birthday also has an overall presentation level that most games on the platform struggle to achieve. It reflects Square Enix's commitment to the PSP since its launch. So many of the company's games appear to be fantastic. The default point of view in the game is a convenient over-the-shoulder viewpoint that also provides a magnificent view of the landscape. Square Enix has created a stunningly beautiful set of locales, each richly detailed with the kind of minute details that are uncommon in PSP games. The Third Birthday, like its protagonist, is both beautiful and disturbed, flawed, fascinating, and maddening. It's also brief. The frustrating difficulty of some sections means that the 6 episodes may take a while to complete, but the journey is just about 5 hours long. Offers an engaging tale with a grating heroine and unique gameplay that makes for a thrilling experience on occasion, but is frequently hampered by rigid controls and irritating difficulties. For some, putting up with the imperfections is a little price to pay in order to experience Aya Brea's unique trip. However, in the context of the franchise, Third Birthday started to strongly divide a fanbase that was gaining traction. By dropping the title of Parasite Eve completely, adopting a different style of art, combat, and animation, and also the fact that it became a staple for the PSP consoles, cemented the notion that the franchise was losing its popularity very quickly. And unfortunately, the plot direction of the entire series was also made more convoluted after Third Birthday, which possibly made it difficult for Square Enix to carry on with the 4th installment in this franchise. It is obvious that Parasite Eve became a cult classic almost immediately. The series has been on hold for over 2 decades, with the exception of its sequel a few years later and its loose PSP spin-off. It's one of the few Square Enix projects we don't expect to see again. However, it appears that a resurgence may be in the works. For nearly 22 years, Fantasy Anime claims to have been providing ROMs for titles like Chrono Trigger, Parasite Eve and Front Mission. They further allege that Square Enix has only recently issued a cease and desist order for them to remove the ROMs. Square Enix's request that someone stop distributing its games without permission is obviously insufficient. Although according to Fantasy Anime, the removal did not cover a handful of more obscure Square Enix properties. Only series, such as Final Fantasy and Chrono Cross, that have titles or reboots in active development were marked. There's a case to be made that the inclusion of Parasite Eve in the takedown indicates that someone at Square Enix is engaged on something related to the cult horror game. It's unclear whether this will be a remake or a completely new entry, but it's an intriguing development. Keep your eyes peeled out, fellow geeks and gamers, and join us in hoping that Parasite Eve makes a banging comeback the way it was always meant to be.